That was from the day of the first article, which would have been in
2008.
2008,
Yeah.
all the way till 2013.
2013, yeah.
You guys didn't make really like a single penny from this.
Nothing.
Wow.
Absolutely nothing.
Wow. Hey guys, welcome to Backstage with Millionaires. I'm Caleb, your host, and today the guest that we have on the show is Dhimant. Dhimant is one of the co-founders of a company called The Better India, which is basically an online media platform where they've done something a little bit unconventional by deciding to focus exclusively on positive news. So I came to India about 2.5 years ago. I didn't know that I would be living here long term when I first came. I was just backpacking, traveling around the country. But as I started getting more and more invested in India, I started to realize that I needed to be informed about what was going on in the country, right? People would approach me and say, hey, did you hear about this thing that happened? And I would not know about it, right? So I started reading the news. And what I realized was that there was a lot of negative news. You get online, you're trying to find out what's going on, and you're hit with terrorism, right? You're hit with politicians fighting with other politicians. You're hit with droughts and famines. You're hit with so many different things that sort of bring your mood down. And it's important to be informed and to know what's going on, both the good and the bad. But I found that there was an overwhelming amount of negative news, and the positive news was sort of few and far between. So that's why when I heard about The Better India, it was like a breath of fresh air for me. Yeah. But I'm curious to know, 10 years ago when you sort of started The Better India in the first place, what was sort of the reason for you to start this company?
Like when you came in and you saw the newspapers and you read the television and you saw the television shows, and a lot of us were kind of getting exposed to, and it's still the case, you get exposed to a lot of negative news. So back in, I think it was about 2008, when we saw the advent of the internet, right? So the internet is suddenly starting to appear, and lots of new ideas coming up, social networks, and people being able to shop online and things. So one of the thoughts we had, that's me and my co-founder, is that could we leverage the internet for large-scale social impact, right? Like drive change. And one of the things that kind of emerged to us, and this was basically from us consuming content every day, was that we could actually drive change by influencing people's mindsets using media, right? And what was clearly lacking back then is that there was absolutely nobody talking about the small progressive acts that were happening in the country in various pockets, right? And there was a lot of it happening around us. So we started looking up online to try and find such avenues, and we just didn't find anything. So we decided that why don't we start this it was more a pet, sort of I would say more like a personal blog or a project that we wanted to start. But we wanted to document these stories so that others could, refer them. So that kind of led us to start going around weekends in Bangalore and identifying people and just writing their stories and putting it up on a blog. With no real idea that there would be a large-scale venture out of this, but more from saying that someone needs to kind of document this and take it to people so that people kind of change their mindsets about things, and people are mobilized to come together and drive change. So that led to the idea of the Better India back then. And for the longest period of time, I remember we kind of kept working on weekends, covering these stories and putting it up because we were just passionate about these stories to be told. And very early on, I think it was about 3 months after we had started this blog, and we'd written about a school which employs deaf, which basically recruits only deaf students, right? And after we wrote about it, 2 weeks later, that school got in touch with us saying, who are you guys? Because a group of people came down to our school and they donated 3.5 lakhs rupees, and they fixed our hostel block and they bought furniture. And when we asked them, where did you guys hear about us? And they said we read it on a blog called The Better India. Right?
Wow.
And to me, that was like a huge revelation of the kind of change we could achieve if we scaled this up. And so that was really what led to The Better India kind of growing from there.
And I was going to ask you, sort of in the early days, right? Where were you? Obviously, you're getting energy from just the positive stories that you're hearing and the people that you're meeting. These are some of the the best people in India, I would say, people that are positively impacting the country, and you're covering that. So of course you're getting some of that, energy from that as well. But I think, a lot of people are focusing on, when they start something like this, they're focusing on, okay, at what point am I going to start making money from it, right? Yeah. And I think, probably it was a long time for you guys before you even considered that, right? It seems like it was something sort of like a passion project, right?
Yeah. Like I said, it was a personal project, and we were very passionate about these stories being told and then being taken to a larger audience. So what kept us going was the impact, the constant feedback of people coming back and telling us how something changed their lives, and how we showed them a new perspective, and how they're able to channelize their money and time to something more constructive. Right? That feedback never stopped, and it hasn't stopped till this day, right? And I think for the longest period of time, that was our, currency, so to speak, in terms of what we were earning and what kept us excited.
Sure. That was from the day of the first article, which would have been in
2008,
all the way till 2013.
2013, yeah.
You guys didn't make really like a single penny from this.
Nothing.
Wow.
Absolutely nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was always on the weekends, or at some point you started getting more invested and you were going out during weekdays?
So I think from 2008 till almost about 2011, it was us on the weekends. 2011 is when my co-founder quit what she was doing, and she kind of got onto it, doing it almost on an alternate day basis.
At what point? At that point, how large was the impact of the blog? It was a blog still, right?
It was still a blog. Yeah. It was still a blog. We had a few contributors from across the country.
Okay.
Who were like reporting stories of change from the ground level. It was still a blog, but we had started seeing the impact being significant. We had started to see that almost every week people were writing to us now, and that led us to believe that this needs to scale, because the impact can just kind of grow exponentially. So which is when in 2011 we took a conscious call that one of us would quit and kind of build that, and one of us would continue to bring some income into the house. So that was in 2011. So 2011 to 2013, she kind of ran it while I was also doing, I was working elsewhere. And 2013 is when we both of us got onto it full time. And from 2013 to 2015, we actually ran it without any income. Just digging into our savings and funds. And
I was gonna ask, was that a difficult time for you guys?
That was a very difficult time, and I would try and do some consulting gigs on the side, on the product management side and tech side. But that was a hard part. Yes, that was the hardest phase. More so because it's also it's not just the revenue aspect. I think it's also this lot of social pressure, right? Because both of us were like, engineering graduates and then B school graduates. And then you're also starting to see that a lot of your peers are growing up, climbing the whole corporate ladder. And there's a lot more happening in terms of both, I would say, financial status and also social status, right? And here we were like kind of resetting everything. Going back and saying, we'll build this and we'll figure it out, right? So I would say 2013 till 2015. 2015 is when we raised a small round of funding, which is what helped us to kind of, tide over that phase. So 2013, 2015 was definitely the hardest.
Was there any point during those years, those 2 years, where you were thinking, did we make a mistake? Are we going to regret this later on? Is this all going to fall apart? Or were you pretty confident that this was something that was going to work out in the end eventually?
I wouldn't say we were very confident that this would work out eventually. I don't think any startup has that level of confidence. But we were extremely passionate and we were very excited about what we were building. And this whole impact feedback, which kept coming in from our readers, kept us going through that phase. So I would say it was more the passion that won over more rational thinking.
So finally, you've raised a round of funding. Things look like more promising for you guys. Did anything change at that point? Like what were some of the things that you, for example, used the funds for? And also it's been so long that you've been running this thing without money coming in from the outside, right? Yeah. It must have been a little bit weird. All of a sudden you guys have some money, right?
Yeah. The first thing that happened is that we got an office space for us. We were 4 of us. Until then we were all working out of our homes. So we managed to get an office where we actually started seeing each other on a daily basis. And I think that itself was very, very transformational for the company, because we are now able to discuss and think instead of just, meeting once a week. So we could afford a small office space. The other part is that we could also now afford to pay some of our contributors. And the third was we were able to hire people. Until then, we were just kind of very, very conservative in terms of spending and getting the right kind of talent. But this allowed us to get some really good talent and some really good people who joined us at that phase. And I think without them, we wouldn't have been able to, grow the Better India. So that support, which happened because of that funding, I think was crucial to help us scale. Because I don't think otherwise we would have seen where the Better India is today.
I think there's a different approach that maybe some of these media platforms take, though, where they, primarily exist off of ad revenue, right?
Yeah.
Was that something that you had considered, or?
Yeah. So I was on the side, I was doing a lot of research on monetization models and business models for media, right? And I personally didn't find that the advertising model would take off. The biggest challenge there is that you have to be significantly large in terms of eyeballs for any of these, advertising models to kind of kick in and even be worth worth the effort that you put in. But what I was very, very confident about is that the community we had built was a very different community. Was a community very socially conscious, very progressive, and very geared towards solving problems, right? And so I basically figured that if we could talk about this community to large companies and to brands and say that, hey, if you want to talk something which is about a cause, or which is something which is progressive, which is something which is innovative, then we have the right audience for you. But if you're looking for something where it gets you like billions of eyeballs, then of course we were not there. So I figured that that's the sector that we need to be in. It's not necessary, and I continue to believe that it's not necessary that you have to be the largest player in the sector to start making revenues, right? You can be small, but you have something very, very valuable which others don't, and then you start figuring out how to monetize that. So we started working with brands, and then slowly one or two brands took a bet with us, and then it really worked out for them. So then they continued working with us, and then through word of mouth, more and more brands. So today I think we worked with over 200 odd brands who actually run very meaningful content series on our platform. So it's not so much as hey, I'm a brand and I do this, but it's more about saying, I'm a brand, I care about this topic, and hence let's talk about this topic together on the Better India platform, right? And so that's really the business model that we kind of nailed down on, and that has helped us significantly over the years. Okay,
so that's your business model, and then there was, I think it must have been around that time when there's the four of you, you're now in an office, you come up with this business model, but obviously between then and now, it's 2019. I think just looking out the window here, how many employees do you guys have?
We're 90 now.
90, yeah. Amazing, right? From 4 to 90 in less than 5 years. It's incredible. So what is that process been like? Because it was a hobby, right? Yeah. It was more of a hobby. It was a blog that became a business. Was running a business something that you kind of discovered you were good at, or were there a lot of bumps and pitfalls along the way that you didn't expect?
I think we definitely learned along the way, right? Because when you convert a passion project into a business venture, there are lots of pros and cons on both sides. So when you're doing a passion project, it's great as a passion. It really kind of keeps you going. But you still have to figure out where you make getting bread from, right? Where you're making your money from. When we make a passion project into a business venture, it's great because it's starting to scale. You're learning a lot. But the downside is that you can no longer be as nimble and as fast as you were when it was just two of you, covering stories. But I think the biggest challenge for me, and I think the biggest learning for us was how do we continue to stay relevant as we kind of grow in scale. And what really worked for us is this whole model of constant experimentation. Right? So we would experiment a lot with respect to the kind of content we put out, the content formats, where we would distribute, how often we would distribute, and even the tone of the content, right? So every month we would experiment with new things, and whatever worked, we would back it and continue to do more of that, and what didn't work, we would just kind of shelve it. But I would say that's really what the funding that happened allowed us to invest in experimentation. And the experimentation set us up for success. Because what I realized over the last, over the 5 years that we've been running this as a company, is that in the space of digital media, and the digital content consumption, consumer behaviors are changing almost every 6 months. Today you find yourself today you find yourself doing a lot of Instagram, and you're seeing you're consuming content very differently, very visually, or you're watching videos on YouTube or now TikTok, and a year ago Twitter threads and Twitter content consumption was on the rise, and before that there were blogs, and before that there was long form, and there was so much, right? And then you see this whole trend where suddenly now Netflix is kind of topping entertainment as compared to television and all of that. So I think one thing we did well is to keep an eye out on what the trends were, and then kind of really adapting our offering every 6 months, every 4 months, 6 months, and kind of being ready for the wave, right? So now you know that, okay, this is going to happen, then can you kind of be there, and can you be doing this? I remember this happened with the video content, when for the longest period of time we were just writing long form stories, and I think it was about 2017 we saw the advent of video, and we were seeing internationally more and more people were watching video content, and we said, we should totally do this. And I still remember it was, I studied a bunch of, video editing tools, and we put out some videos ourselves. And then we saw a lot of traction, and then that's when we decided to kind of hire and start setting up a video team. So, I think the biggest learning has been how fast you experiment and how fast you implement those changes in your company. And I think that's the single most valuable thing that you can do, especially when you're in an early stage growth.
So it seems like things have been going well. You guys have sort of passed some of those roadblocks or those hiccups that, going from a blog to a proper, online media platform. Where would you say you guys are today? And I'm also curious to know, what is the path for you guys moving forward?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And we're working on something really interesting now. So what happened last year is that we were researching on. So we've built this large community. So we have a very large community of people who read us. We have a content platform, and we're thinking, what do we build on top of this to go deeper in the impact space, right? How do we bring about more change? Can you build something on top of this? And we're doing a lot of experiments whole of last year, and one thing really started emerging. So whenever we would write about a small enterprise, or like a really small micro enterprise making great products, a lot of our readers would come back asking us, hey, where can we buy this? Like, can you guys connect us? And so on. And a lot of these small enterprises didn't really have the ability to accept orders and kind of fulfill them and so on. And so one of the experiments we did is, when we wrote about such an enterprise, we actually just put a hey, pay now button here and said, let's see what happens. And interestingly, we started selling out a lot of stock for the small enterprise. And when I kind of did more research on this, we found that there are millions of such micro and small enterprises, rural artisans and self-help groups in the country who do not have access to the consumer internet audience, the audience that's watching this on. But the fact remains that the supply side is there, right? And we figured that on the demand side, we already have a lot of people coming and reading us, and they are interested in these kind of products. So that's when we decided that we could build a marketplace on top of this, connecting the small enterprises with this audience. We basically came up with the idea that we would push for eco-friendly products which help generate livelihoods for marginalized communities, and so on. So anything that's good for you and the planet and the community, right? So that led to this. It was called the Better India Shop, and then eventually we've now called it Karnival.com, Karnival with a K. So Karnival is essentially a celebration of all the good things. And I think our focus now is clearly how do we make Karnival the destination for sustainable products, right? So we want to kind of be the largest destination for sustainable products in the country, and thereby helping increase the income levels and the livelihoods of the small enterprises. So the next year is largely focused on building out everything from the technology to the operations, supply chain, sourcing, all of that for Karnival is where I would kind of think of it. The way we see ourselves, right, is how can we be the largest impact platform, right? Where people come to consume content and get inspired, people can buy things and still make a difference, and people can do advocacy and kind of get influenced by a lot of a lot of good things that are happening around us, and we kind of catalyze all of this change, online through all these channels. So that's really where I think we're working towards.
So you guys can find the link to Karnival, what did you say, IN or .com?
.com.
And the Better India as well, and also any other relevant social media links. If you have any questions about Dhimant's journey or the journey of the Better India, would love it if you could leave those down below as a comment. And if you know of anybody that would be inspired by this story or interested to watch this video, would love it if you could share it with them as well. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Gail.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, there we go. I know you have a meeting that you need to.
This is awesome. You're efficient, man.
Yeah.